Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, I'm beginning to realize that for the longest time I didn't know what this show was. I would do news stories, I would talk about things that interest me and so forth. I'm realizing that part of this show is detailing hypocrisy. I was baffled by how many conservatives I had on my channel, by how many right-wingers watched my shows. But I think I'm beginning to understand why. Hypocrisy, regardless of whether it's coming from the left, the right, the center, or wherever, it draws a crowd. And if my hypothesis is true, that the only way we're going to get past this partisanship is to be honest. It's to regard the situation, regardless of the political allegiances associated with it, but to regard it earnestly. And to kind of make the point of, well, if you're going to behave this way against them, shouldn't you also be consistent and behave that same way against these other people who you are closer in alignment with? The Democratic Party has found a bone to pick with Gorish. That's Trump's pick for the Supreme Court. Senate Democrats focus on Gorish's defense of Bush-era terrorism policies. That's interesting. So they've been digging in documents. And in the documents, they found that Gorish was affiliated with the Bush policies regarding to torture, surveillance, essentially the policies after 9/11. So Dianne Feinstein, requested documents covering all litigation related to the Bush administration's anti-terrorism, intelligence, detention, interrogation, military, or related efforts in which you drafted or reviewed a legal filing. The request signaled a potential new avenue of questioning for Gorish by the committee's Democrats and came as the partisan and ideological battle over Gorish's nomination began to heat up on Capitol Hill. Chuck Schumer held a news conference with people who said they had been harmed by Gorish's ruling, and Senator accused President Trump's nominee of enacting a right-wing pro-corporate special interest agenda as a judge. Given the chance, I'll have no doubt he'll do it again on the Supreme Court. That's amazing. That's amazing. Pay no attention to the president that you had for 8 years doing the exact same strategy. But you're going to... Besides portraying Gorish as a harmful to the little guy, Democratic senators and aides have explored his involvement with issues of executive privilege and terrorism-related cases. Patrick Leahy said that on areas of surveillance and torture, what I've seen so far, his views are a lot different than mine. When George Gorish was working for the administration, at least based on the initial things that I've looked at, he appears to be a cheerleader for President Bush's views on executive power. Leahy said, declining to specify which documents he had seen. So this Democrat takes issue with Gorish's, perspective on executive power. Does he understand what Obama did in that office in those last 8 years? Did your previous president, did you have the same view? Were your views a lot different than that previous president? Were they? Because the Obama administration exceeded what Bush did in regards to the policies that he was putting in place. Yes, he stopped torture in this country. He was still renditioning people to countries that did torture, so keep the shit real. In regards to surveillance, Obama was functioning illegally beyond what the Constitution said, beyond what Bush was doing when he was in that office. Obama was catching everything and everybody, including reviewing people from outside the country, meaning our allies. He was spying on everything. This is amazing. Leahy feels a particular way about surveillance. I wonder, did he communicate his feelings to his previous president, who clearly didn't feel the same way Leahy is saying he feels about this whole thing? Feinstein was also interested in a reference to a proposal for a seminar on torture policy at the Council of Foreign Relations. Please provide the committee any materials related to any involvement you had in the issue of torture, including so-called enhanced interrogation techniques, including this proposal, she wrote. So, look, Gorish did take a position in this. I mean, for the most part, he was a cheerleader. Gorish was backing them up. Gorish even went to Guantanamo Bay and was making the argument for what they were doing in Guantanamo Bay, essentially a torture gulag outside the United States jurisdiction. So yes, in that particular case, they're right. I've also kind of made this case before. This seat belonged to Obama's choice. I don't particularly like the person Obama chose, but by the Constitution, it was his choice to make. The Republicans made the decision that they weren't going to put anybody on the Supreme Court because they did not want to put Obama's choice on the Supreme Court. The Democrats will be crazy to turn around and reward them with a Supreme Court pick after they shafted the other guy for over a year. Now, that is a separate and distinct issue from the case that they're raising here, though. Again, I already had to make this case that no, they should not confirm the Supreme Court pick. But are you really going to make this argument in regards to the policies that this particular guy had as if the Obama administration didn't have the exact same policies? Yes, maybe not necessarily with torture. But if you're so aggrieved by this, if you're so bothered by the things that they did in the Bush administration, why didn't you prosecute him? Why didn't you prosecute? I mean, if you're making the case that you don't want to confirm this judge because this judge was okay with torture, okay, what is your issue with torture? Is your issue with torture that it's against the law? If your issue with torture that it's against the law, why didn't you prosecute the guy that was actively doing it and that actively said, yes, I said torture this person? This rings hollow. This rings absolutely hollow to me. For that matter, if you're so aggrieved by torture, what about murders? What about murders? What about murdering civilians? Your president, the Obama administration, made the argument. I distinctly remember when he made it. That, how did he say it? What was? I'm trying to get the exact words, but to paraphrase, judicial review does not necessarily mean through the judicial branch. That the executive branch can make the determination on who they want to kill. You're making this argument that your problem with Gersh is that he was okay with the power accrued in the office during the Bush administration. Were you okay with the power accrued in that office under the Obama administration? Because Obama expanded everything that Bush did in that particular office. This is amazing to me. This just blows me away. It's as if the last 8 years never took place. It's as if these guys weren't members of the Democratic Party at the time where their president was doing the exact same thing, was expanding the powers of the presidency, going all the way to making the case that he can kill Americans. But you're picking it. This is absolutely aggravating to me. Why are you guys always in this quagmire of hypocrisy? It's like it just sticks to you like body odor. It's like you can't get away from it. Everything that you say and do shows a hypocritical angle associated with it. And you have to kind of ask yourself, why? Why are the things that you say now ringing so hollow? Why does this stuff seem to be completely political and without integrity at all? Why do the positions that you're taking in this administration seem to be so drastically different than the positions you took in the prior administration? It seems like you gave a lot of stuff a blind eye that Obama was doing, but now you're Johnny on the spot. That the new guy is in office. And the new guy wants to continue the things that Obama was doing, but now you have issue with those things. Again, I mean, you shouldn't confirm Gorish. But this is the most ridiculous argument for why you shouldn't confirm him that I've ever heard up to this point. You're making an argument talking about he hurt people? Obama made the case that if you were 16 years or older, you're fair game to be murdered. Do you think that hurt people? Do you think the 2 or 3 Americans that Obama murdered, 2 of which were children, do you think they were hurt by the actions in that administration? For that matter, you're talking about he's going to hurt the little guy and the corporations that he's working for. 95% of the wealth in the Obama administration went to the top 1%. 95%. The worst that Trump could do is best him by 5%. We're merely talking about margins. We're merely talking about margins. Your arguments ring absolutely hollow. They ring absolutely hollow. You may be looking for a reason to rebuff Gurish. This is the most ridiculous reason that you could pull out of a hat. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. I agree with you that this stuff is absolutely gross. But I thought this stuff was gross in the prior term with your president doing this exact same stuff. So this rings hollow to me. This rings hollow to me. And again, if you were bugged that much by torture, if you were bugged that much by murder, if you were bugged that much by quote unquote hurting the little guy, why weren't you having these conversations with the Obama administration? Why weren't you having these talks with Obama? Why weren't you out here giving these proclamations to the news about how, yeah, we don't want Obama murdering civilians. We don't want Obama doing mass surveillance. We don't want Obama hurting the little guy with his corporate policies. Do you guys realize that right now, at this point, your ratings in regards to how the public views you is less than Trump by like 10 or 11 points? How do you think you've dug that ditch up to this point? How? How do you think you've gotten there? How do you think you've managed to get a score that's ridiculously low, that's embarrassingly low? I would make the case that part of it is just rank hypocrisy. And look, we need to stop acting like hypocrisy is a quote-unquote minor sin. It's only a minor sin if you consider it a minor sin. There should be some integrity about the things these people say. There should be some consistency about the things these people say. They are literally getting up, bringing in people talking about Gorish hurt the little guy. If you're so aggrieved by Guantanamo, why didn't you close it? Why didn't you close it? Obama had the authority to do it. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. Do you honestly think on day one, if Trump said he was going to close Guantanamo, that he wouldn't have closed it? Trump would have closed that shit up on day one. And that's the difference. You guys may not like Trump. I certainly don't. But there's one thing about him that I absolutely like, or at the very least I absolutely respect. He does things from the function of a leader. Yes, his ideas are horrible, but he's willing to do them. Your president went in office and was not willing to do the things that he was espousing on the campaign trail. No, Trump is going to lie about a lot of the stuff. But I'm making the point that Obama continuously made this case that he was just completely weak and unable to do pretty much anything in that office. He was completely constrained by the powers of the office. That was just weakness. That was just weakness. If anything, Trump showed you that was just weakness. I give you a perfect example. I was having a conversation with a guy today. I'm a friend of mine. And he's like, hey, he said, did you hear that Nixon mentioned that the drug laws, that the pot thing had to do with castigating blacks and hippies and essentially being able to demonize them and get them out of the political process? I was like, yeah, I did know that. And I kind of made this point. I was like, you know, it's amazing that we had a pot smoker of a president. And even though that president was a prolific pot smoker for like 10 or 20 years or however long he was smoking pot, he knew that the reason they put those laws into place was to castigate blacks, members of his own race, and liberals, members of his political party. He had the authority to, on day one, come out and say, look at this paper. They started this drug war purely for political means. I am now changing the scheduling of marijuana, and I'm letting all those people who were locked up purely for pot out of prison. He had the power to do that. He could have did that. Donald Trump, if that was his ideology, would have did that on day one. You have to ask yourself, why are these guys always being hypocrites? Why are these guys so weak in getting their agenda passed? Why can't these guys get elected? And once elected, why can't they stay elected? I suspect it has something to do with these guys being hypocrites and how all this stuff, every time it comes up, it seems absolutely absurd and ridiculous in regards to the things that they're doing and things they're saying when hefted against what took place over the last 8 years. So I'm going to leave it at that and get some rest. This is absurd. This is just absolutely absurd. The hypocrisy on this is obscene. It's obscene. It bugs me because to me it boils down to civil liberties. It sounds like they're making this argument that this guy is horrible on civil liberties. Your president was horrible on civil liberties. Why weren't you having this conversation with him? Why weren't you having this conversation with him? And beyond having this conversation with him, if you guys were so aggrieved by torture, if you were so aggrieved by Guantanamo, if you were so upset by the surveillance and everything else, you had the opportunity to take Bush to trial, or at the very least to go after him for the crimes he committed in that office. Obama gave him a pass. You guys gave him a pass. And Obama turned around and started doing the exact same thing Bush was doing in that office. Now another Republican is in that office. And that Republican is going to use the powers of the office that your president accrued in that office. And you guys are terrified. And you guys are mentioning all this stuff now, even though this stuff never came up when your president was doing it. But now that the other guy is doing it, now that the other guy has the power to enforce all of this stuff and do this stuff, and some of the stuff is absolutely ghastly, by not prosecuting Bush, by giving Obama a pass on the things that he was doing in that office, you have no standing, none whatsoever, to make this argument against Trump. None. Zero. You have no credibility on this front. It's one thing if you guys stood on principle from the beginning. You didn't. It's one thing if you held Obama accountable from the beginning. You didn't. Don't start now. Or at the very least, you can't start now. At least not legitimately. So, I'm going to end this here. Guys, if you like the content, like the video. Subscribe if you kind of want to stay abreast of everything. Thank you, and good night.